Team Red versus Team Blue. We have the billionaires, and now we have our first trillionaire versus the working class American. There's a gender divide, and now there's even a generational divide. Seems like millennials and Gen Z are blaming boomers, and boomers are kind of just thinking the younger generations are ill-equipped for the market or lazy. Why is there so much division? Welcome back to the Wei of Reckoning podcast. And today we kind of just want to dig into a little bit of, what's going on, why is there so much division, and kind of try to understand both sides. Like, why are people picking these sides? So I think the most obvious one right now I just see everywhere is, I just call them Team Red and Team Blue. Whether you're Democrat, liberal, or you're conservative and Republican, I think there is some, overlapping things. And that's the thing I think we have to understand. Not one person is just, one thing. Like, if you're a Republican or a Democrat, you don't have to believe in everything that the party says, but it just seems like now we're playing for a sports team. And that's kind of why I kind of call it Team Red and Team Blue. If you're on one team, it's like you're just going to keep rooting for one team, regardless of what your personal ideas or your personal, compass, really. I think everyone just goes, all right, if Team Blue says this, I'm going to go this way, and Team Red is my enemy. Whatever Team Red does, I'm going to do the opposite, and I want them to lose, is kind of the mentality. And it seems on both sides. If you're Team Red, you want Team Blue to lose. And I think that's really ingrained and has really amplified for some reason in the last at least 8 years. And I think maybe in the last 15 or 10 years for sure, it just seems to be escalating, this division. And I see this all the time. I mean, I'm in California. We're a very Team Blue state. But, right now with even like the mayoral races and the governor races, you do see this pent up desire to start voting for Team Red. And for me, ultimately, I always tell my friends, before you assign what team you want to be, really try to write down what your core beliefs are. So before you, lose yourself and align yourself to a political party, what do you believe in? And for me, I kind of land, there's certain aspect of both that I do love. I mean, I think it is advantageous to have a racially equal, tolerant society, but also, we have to be a nation of laws, rules. It's really what keeps this country flourishing, that we are a bunch, of people that believe in the rule of law. But now the question is, are these laws respectable? Are they fair? And I think this is kind of the crux of where a lot of the argument and conflict is. I think everyone wants, to be treated with respect. They want economic growth. They want economic opportunity. I think everyone wants to live in harmony with their neighbors. And the way that the parties are skewing each other, it's, I think, driving a bigger and bigger wedge, I would say, what I tend to see is propaganda against the other side. So, a lot of times Team Blue is like, if you're Team Red, you're a racist, you're a bigot, you are intolerant of, immigrants. And if you're on Team Red, you call people, they're socialists and they want to destroy America. And for the most part, I would say 90% of my friends are probably Team Blue. But I do like to listen to, why they think that way, and people who are Team Red, why they think that way. And, I do start seeing that from a macroeconomics level, a lot of policies that Team Blue, is pushing is wealth redistribution. I think that is, let's say, their economic war cry. Like, a lot of times, we got to tax the billionaires, we got to tax the millionaires, and we have to redistribute this wealth. It's not fair that, right now Elon Musk is worth $1 trillion, but the average American, I mean, they're losing their homes, they're losing their jobs, they're, getting destroyed by inflation. And that is, doesn't seem fair. And I would say on Team Red, they're about, kind of just economic, like pushing the economy forward and bringing new value without looking at the redistribution piece. So it's getting rid of regulations so that, we can build more. And a lot of times it's more like financial services. And I don't think that's really too much of a value add, but they want to bring back manufacturing. I think, I will use Elon as a example, give them tax credit cuts so that, he can go to Mars or go to Moon and kind of build that industry with the phone industry, infrastructure. But a lot of times, on the other side, they neglect, I would say, it's like these, like the environmental impacts. I know a lot of data centers are being open and they're saying they're tainting the water. So one side just wants to be unhindered and just go and produce and, increase production without any safety nets. While the other side, I feel all they care about is just taking the wealth and redistributing it without a proper path of how to increase. So I feel Team Blue, they just want to redistribute the pie a little bit, but they don't have a lot of plans to increase the size of the pie. Where I think Team Red, they want to increase the size of the pie, but like the slices and distribution seems to be bigger and bigger for the people who are, at the very top. I think that is the main divide as to, I would say Team Blue, Team Red, and also kind of the billionaire versus the working class division. The other division that I see is really this gender gap online. They're saying Gen Z, they're not really dating anymore. There just seems to be this divide between men and women. I think historically, if we want to go to historical context, the conservative side was like, back in the day, the man provided, the women stayed home and, nurtured the children. It's what biologically, we were meant to do. But, society has changed. A lot of times people were back in the 60s, wherever, women didn't have the right to vote. Maybe they had to stay home and sustain abuse from their husband because they didn't have a lot of, ways to get out of it. They were kind of stuck in their marriage. And I think that was maybe one of the boiling points or pain points that, we kind of developed into a more, I would say, progressive, balance between men and women. Now women can support themselves. They don't really need to be with an abusive husband if they don't want to be. And I remember growing up, my mom told my sister, when she was dating, it's like, you never want to rely on a man financially. You should always, be able to provide for yourself. I think that was pretty good advice. I don't think she gave me any dating advice. So, but I think now I would say when I was growing up, there was this image being pushed that to women was that, if you're a housewife or if you just want to stay home, it was kind of looked down upon. It was kind of just, you have to be a girl boss. You have to go out there and grind in the industrial world and, make a living for yourself. And being a housewife or, just staying home almost seemed like a cop-out or whatnot. And, I kind of want to have a balanced view of it. I don't think anyone should be shamed into what they want to do. If, you want to stay home and, take care of children, I think that's great. And if you want to go into, the industry and go and hustle and make your own money, and I think that is also great. And I think we got to bring these things into a balance, just somewhere in the middle. And this is where, my symbol for Wei of Reckoning is the scale. And that is something that, in economics, what I loved was the idea of equilibrium. You have demand and you have supply. So if we all have almost unlimited let's say, want for goods and services, but there's only so much supply. And what determines the balance really, or the equilibrium, is the price. So if everything was free, I mean, people would just be getting everything and we would quickly run out of supply. If we only have 100 iPhones and 1,000 people, it would quickly diminish because everyone's going to try to grab one. So what determines, how balances what we want versus what we can afford is price. And I think that idea really resonated with me with even how we should run society. And we need new metrics, I think. So, for example, even like, what are the disbalances and extremes that we have? We need to find an equilibrium, a balance, because a lot of times both sides, there are truth in both extremes. But living in extremes is just not gonna work very well for us. We have to see what the extremes are and find the right balance, kind of meet here. And depending on how society moves and the needs of society, we have to be able to shift and really come up with new metrics. So that is kind of something I want to explore in the next few episodes. What are ailing us? What are the extremes? What are the political divide, gender divide? Now we have economic divide and generational divide. What are the truths on the extremes? And how do we measure a new measurement so that we can bring everything into equilibrium? And for me, when we're saying why is there so much divide this time, I think I would say the most rational, non-conspiracy theory, reason is that division does sell. I think a lot of times, when you're mad at something, when you're, triggered on the opposite side, you want to make your point, especially online. It's been proven that engagement is skyrocketing if you introduce hate and discourse. And I think trying to find solutions in this, I think a lot of people will find it boring, but and that's fine. For me, it's like, hey, let's at least put something out there. Let's crowdsource some ideas, and at least it's out on the internet. And maybe 5 years, 10 years, when people are starving for solutions, we at least have something like a framework, I think. And that's kind of something I want to kind of work on. 10 frameworks, things that society needs, I think, on a economic, a spiritual, and legal thesis as to where that balancing point is, where is that equilibrium point is. And even right now, a lot of discussion I see online is the difference between is capitalism best or is socialism best. And I was like, there's a fine balance. There are policies that both sides are great. I think capitalism lifted millions of people out of poverty, and just looking at capitalistic countries, they've done very well. But right now, we're kind of seeing the darker side. There are some pros and cons that are being more visible. And same with socialism. I mean, there are great socialism. People say, look at Russia, how the USSR failed. And, to me, it's like, hey, they went from probably the smallest GDP European nation to a global superpower. I don't know, their economy failed at the end, but to go from, a backwater European that I think all the Western European countries look down on to a global superpower is no small feat. But right now we need to take an accounting really of what are the best policies, what are the best, systems that we can use, like a merge. We don't have to be stuck in one or the other. And the invention of the internet right now with AI, these are things that these archaic systems of capitalism, socialism that was created in the 1800s, they couldn't even fathom, I think, the kind of technology we have now. And we really need to take a deeper look of how we can organize ourselves better, like mentally, how do we harvest human innovation? And I think that we have to ask ourselves, what is the point of government and living together in this concentrated form? And that is something I do want to explore, and I think the upcoming episodes will take a deeper dive at these things. And I'm going to try to look for case studies, look for policies that worked with some real life implications and consequences. I think, one of my favorite books that I read was Freakonomics, and they went, to little case studies and kind of, through economics, kind of see why things turned out the way it did. And that is something I do, I think I want to do. So stay tuned. I think it'll be great. And I think, if we can all crowdsource some ideas and everyone kind of just put in their 2 cents, we can really create a better society for all of us. So thank you for watching, and hope to see you next time.